Hi, I'm Karen. We're here at Montavilla Sewing Center, and today we're going to get started on free motion quilting. Now, I had a previous video on how to set up your machine and some considerations for free motion quilting. One of the things I'm going to reiterate on this video is to make sure you have your feed dogs down. There's usually a switch somewhere on your machine that you can lower your feed dogs, and if you look carefully, you can see they're already in the down position. And then when you're beginning free motion quilting, you want to use a solid colored fabric and contrasting thread. That way you can see what you're doing and you're not distracted by prints or by seams that you're going over. So start with what's simple. Now, you also might want to have maybe a pen and paper where you're going to draw out what you're intending to stitch, and just so you kind of get the feel of what you're doing. Now, when you are drawing, you're actually moving the pencil over the paper, but when you're free motion quilting, it's as if you're moving the paper, but the pencil is stationary. So it's kind of a little bit different there. And then also make sure you use good quality thread. Metler Metricine is a great thread. You don't want something that's going to break or bunch up or whatever in the middle of your stitches. Also, a good quality thread is less likely to skip a stitch, and every stitch counts when you are doing free motion quilting. Okay, and then, so part of the setup that I talked about in my previous video is to use a quilting foot on your machine. Now, this is the kind of foot that is very common. It's got a little bar that when you lift up your needle, the foot comes up. Let's see, I don't have it down. There we go. The foot comes up, and then you can move your fabric a little bit. When the needle goes down, the foot goes down, and that way it can make a stitch. Okay, so I'm going to take that out of there for now. Cut this here. One thing, when you start quilting, usually have your thread, your top thread on the top. An easy way to get that through there is just take a single stitch. I'll just use my needle up, needle down. Take a single stitch. Oh, my thread came out of my... I have to rethread my needle. It's also really helpful to have the kind of machine that has a needle threader. As you can see, that was really easy. So I'm going to take one stitch, move my fabric out of the way, take that stitch out of the fabric, and now that thread is through the eye of the quilting foot. Okay, so set your machine up as in the previous video. Think about where you're going to go. Now, if I'm going to start, I usually start on the edge and then I work my way in. If I was going to do a larger project, say a pieced project like this, maybe even bed size, I would start maybe right next to a seam. That's a good place to start, and it's not really as visible as it would be out in the middle here. Okay, another thing, before we get started, tension is important. So before you start quilting your project, you might want to practice on something else, and this is assuming you already know how to do free motion quilting, because now look on the back here. This is what's called eyelashing, and that just simply means that the tension was set too low. I had it on 2 when I did this, so now I put it back up to 5, which is actually a little tighter than I would normally have for normal sewing. But this is an example of what we don't want to have happen. We want our quilting stitches to look pretty much the same front and back. Okay, and then set up your machine for straight stitching. Some people will do free motion quilting with a zigzag. You're going to get a different look. But remember, the feed dogs are not in play. If you're stitching with zigzag, it's simply, the needle's simply going to go side to side. And this is the kind of foot that you can use with a zigzag stitch. It actually has enough room for that. That's more of like a thread painting type of application. Okay, so we want to sew slowly. Now my machine has a speed slider. I'm going to put it down to about a third of the way up. This is nice because I can put my foot all the way down on the foot control pedal and it will still go a constant speed, and that way it's just the movement of my hands that's going to make the difference. Okay, now notice even with that down, I can still move my fabric around. Okay, so I'm going to start near the edge, hang on to my thread tails for the first couple stitches, and you might even want to stitch in place a little bit to give it a little bit of a knot. And then start going like this. Now I've got my foot all the way down on that pedal. You see, I'm practicing doing little loops from one side to another. You can also do complete circles. If I was going to do a star, I'd go over to where the point of the star is, think about where I'm going to go next. Go over here, stop there, okay. And it's nice to, if you need to stop like on a point that you're making. Over here. I probably could have it a little bit faster, but I'm showing you how slow you should have it when you're first starting. Going down here. Think about where I'm going to go next. Right up there. That's kind of a funny looking star, but you can see it does look like a star. Now, another thing that you can do when you've made a star like this is practice going right for the point on each star. So this will help you think about where you're going, where you're headed. You can also go back along the same pathway that you did before, or echo. Again, think about where you're going, think about that distance that you want to have. There we go. Now, what if I wanted to do a heart? You could start either from the inside of the heart, go down to the point, and go up like this. Or you could start from the lower point of the heart, go up this way, and around this way. Now, I am not using those grippy gloves right now. It's a little bit harder to just use my fingers. If I was using the grippy gloves, it would be easier to actually scoot this around. Also, you notice I don't have this pinned right now. It actually might be helpful for me to have these pins in here, because that will help keep my layers together. Notice when I am pinning, I'm actually burying my points a little bit in the fabric. That saves my skin, okay? Just try it. It really will help. Another thing that you can do is what's called stipple, which is basically you're making gentle little loops like this. And occasionally you paint yourself into a corner, which just make another little loop like that. The idea of a stipple is to keep the stitches the same distance apart, so that you've got, and to not have too many points and things. Again, it's a practice thing. You can also take, say, a stitch that you have. This is the stitch chart that goes with this machine. And let's take one of these stitches here and try that out and see if I can make a larger one of those stitches. So take one of your decorative stitches. Let's see. I'm going to make a heart with a little loop-de-loo on the top. Okay, that didn't work out too well. There you go. Okay. So there's lots of different ways you can do that. Okay. Now, if you quilt really close together, really tiny and small, keep in mind that your quilt is going to be stiffer, because those stitching lines pack down your batting. It's going to be more cardboardy. If, on the other hand, your quilt lines are really far apart, say 6 inches or more, then you're going to get more shifting in your quilt. You don't want to have your batting, excuse me, your batting to wash, like when you're washing it, you don't want to have your batting go over to the side. So. Also, one thing to keep in mind is when you're quilting, there's no wasting. And when you're learning, say like if you were learning to draw or something, you might throw away some of your drawing. Same thing with free motion quilting. You may not save it, but you don't want to necessarily get rid of your practice pieces. So there's 2 things that you can do. First of all, if you make a mistake, you can always put another piece of fabric on the back and do it over. Another thing that you can do is with your practice pieces. Let's say you've done something really successfully and you're real proud of that, but what do you do with this little thing? You can make a placemat or a coaster. There's all kinds of possibilities that you can do. So there's really no downside to learning. There's no failures. It's just all fun, all success. So give it a try. Free motion quilting is something that you can do. If you're going for quilting a big blanket, don't start out with that. Start out with something small like placemat size or even coaster size. Once you get up to the big quilts, make sure that you have your extension table on and that you kind of puddle up your quilt around it so that you're only working with about a foot or maybe even just 6 inches before you rearrange your quilt. So start small and easy, and you'll work up to wonderful quilting by the time you've done it several times. As you can see, free motion quilting can be a lot of fun. So give it a try. We have lots of other videos on here on our YouTube channel as well as my previous videos, so stay tuned for that one too. Thanks for watching. Bye.